All right, it is time to talk about the cardiovascular system. Here's our introduction. Excuse the cat running around. Okay, so first, what do you know about the cardiovascular system? So that's what we're going to be talking about. So in class, we're going to build a word cloud. So what do you know? All right, so now we actually have to learn it. So that's what you know, but let's expand on it. Okay, first it's a closed system. So you can see it goes from the heart, let's bring this up, to the head and arms, comes back to the heart. Goes from the heart to the lungs, back to the heart. From the heart to the lungs, back to the heart. From the heart to the lower body, back to the heart. So everything loops back to the heart, okay? Now let's look at functions of the cardiovascular system. So first, it transports oxygen and removes carbon dioxide. That exchange happens in the lungs. It transports nutrients and removes waste. So it transports nutrients to every single cell, but it's going to pick those nutrients up at the small intestine. And it removes waste. A lot of that is happening in the kidneys, okay? But also there's waste that's removed from the large intestine. It helps to fight disease. So it carries immune fighting cells like leukocytes, which are white blood cells. It also carries antibodies where they need to be to help fight disease. Okay, also transports hormones. So we have a gland, an endocrine gland, releasing hormones inside the body. And that gland is not necessarily near its target cell. So we have our thyroid gland kind of regulating our metabolism right here. If the doctor's ever felt right here and asked you to swallow, checking the size of your thyroid gland, okay? But those hormones produced by the thyroid gland need to get around the body, all right? And the way those hormones do is by traveling through the cardiovascular system. And then they will attach to target cells that have the right receptor. So the hormone and the receptor are a perfect match. If the target cell doesn't have the right receptor, the hormone is not going to do anything to that cell. It helps to regulate body temperature. So through vasodilation, releasing extra heat, and vasoconstriction, retaining heat. And so you can see here, when you have vasodilation at the surface of the skin, you get extra heat loss through the epidermis, so the skin is going to feel warm to the touch. When you have vasoconstriction, you have little heat lost through the epidermis, and the skin is going to feel cooler to the touch. So what are some functions of the cardiovascular system? Here in class, we're going to build another word cloud. So what do you remember about what we just learned? Now let's look at the major components of the cardiovascular system. So what are those major components? Well, we have the heart, we have blood, and we have blood vessels. The hardest working muscle in our body is the heart. Each day of your life, your heart will beat about 100,000 times. It will pump about 2,000 gallons of blood around your body. And in your lifetime, calculating lifetime around 70-ish years, your heart will beat over 2 billion times. That's a lot. So your heart, it is cardiac muscle found only in the heart. It pumps blood, but it also helps to maintain blood pressure. And we'll talk about that in a later lesson in greater detail. So where is the heart? Well, it is in your thorax, in your chest. It is between your lungs. It is officially between the second and the sixth rib, the bulk of the heart. There are vessels coming out of the heart that will go up higher than the second rib. It is behind the sternum right here. It's your heart protector. And it is tilted slightly to the left. So you can see in this illustration right here, you can see it is tilted slightly to the left, which means your left lung is a little bit smaller than your right lung because of that pushing in from the heart. What is the size of your heart? Well, it's about the size of your fist. Its mass is about 250 to 350 grams. So that's about less than 1 pound, because 1 pound is about 450 grams. So it literally weighs less than a pound. So think about, a pound of butter you pick up at the store. Well, your heart has less mass than that. All right, what is your normal heart rate? Okay, so this is a heart preparing for heart transplant surgery and hooked up so that it continues to function. So your normal heart rate is 60 to 100 beats per minute. During sleep, though, your heart rate is going to drop a little bit. 40 to 50 is pretty common. What about blood pressure? So if you think about it, pressure, that's the pressure against the arteries as your heart is pumping. So as the heart squeezes in a burst to push blood out, that is when the pressure in the arteries is the greatest. And then as the ventricles of the heart relax and get prepared to pump again, that is when the pressure is the lowest. So normal blood pressure is about 120 over 80. The 120 is called systolic. That's when those ventricles contract and push. So that's when the walls of the arteries kind of have the greatest squeeze to them. And then 80 is diastolic. That's when the ventricles are relaxed and the arteries have less of a push against them. What are the heart sounds? Well, let's listen. The heart sound result from the valves closing. See that? The valves close, we get the heart sounds. The lub sound is the start of the heart contraction. So lub and then dub is the end of the contraction. So the lub, valves close, the dub, valves close. Just different sets of valves. And we'll learn about that in more specifics. So lub, valves close. Dub, valves close. There's different sets of valves. What do I mean by valves? Well, we'll learn about it more, but you can see right here, it's these with these like strings attached to it. Down here, those are controlling the valves. How big is the average heart? Do you remember? It was about the size of your fist, remember? What is normal pulse rate? Do you remember? It was 60 to 100 beats per minute. What is normal blood pressure? Do you remember? 120 over 80. 120 systolic, 80 diastolic. Here we're going to shade the area where the heart is located. So do you remember where the heart is? Well, this is the sternum right here. That's not where the heart is. These are the ribs. This is the first rib. So here is the second rib, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. So the heart is going to be between the second and the sixth rib, right? Behind the sternum, and it's going to tilt slightly to the left. So something like this, right? Terrible drawing, but you get the idea. All right, what about blood? Well, blood has 4 major components: plasma, erythrocytes, leukocytes, and thrombocytes. Let's talk about it. Plasma. Plasma is the yellow liquid. It's more than half of your blood. So you can see this is blood after it's been centrifuged. And you can see right here, plasma, more than half of the blood. And it contains things like dissolved nutrients, dissolved hormones, dissolved gases, basically anything that's dissolved. But it also has to have some water in order to have the dissolving happen. Erythrocytes. So erythrocytes are red blood cells and they carry oxygen. And you can see They have the greatest mass because when you centrifuge, they go to the bottom. And you could also see, look at that really high percentage. So a lot of your blood is made up of red blood cells. They also remove carbon dioxide. And then we have leukocytes. Leukocytes are white blood cells. They're part of the immune system. You can see right here, white blood cells and platelets are 1%. So leukocytes are literally less than 1% of your blood on any given day. If your white blood cells are elevated, you might be fighting an infection. So leukocytes used to fight infection. There are 5 major types, but we're not really getting into that in this unit. And then we have thrombocytes. What are thrombocytes? Well, they're platelets. So right here, so again, together with white blood cells, they make up 1% of blood. So platelets are less than 1%. They're actually not cells, they're pieces of cells. They're cell fragments, and they form clots to help stop bleeding. Blood cells are produced in red marrow. Remember that from a previous unit? So we have stem cells in red bone marrow, and it results in red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. What part of blood transports oxygen? Remember? Erythrocytes, red blood cells. What part of blood transports hormones? You remember? Plasma, the liquid part. What part of blood helps with clotting? Do you remember? Thrombocytes, platelets. What part of blood fights infection? Remember? Leukocytes, white blood cells. All right, now let's talk blood vessels. So we have artery, vein, and capillary. An artery, it carries blood away from the heart. Artery away, A away. So artery away. You can feel a pulse in your artery. It has a thick muscular layer. It's elastic, stretchy. A vein, it carries blood to the heart. It contains valves to help the blood kind of keep moving in the same direction. It has a thin muscle layer, but a large opening. That opening is called the lumen. And 60% of all your blood at any given time is actually located in your veins. So you can see, here we go, 60% of your blood at any given time is in your veins. Very little is in your capillaries. Some is actually inside your heart. More is in your lungs than is in your heart. And then the rest is somewhat in your arteries. Okay. Here I want to show you, these are valves. Okay. And valves are located, excuse the terrible writing, in veins to keep the blood from kind of coming back. So it keeps the blood moving in the same direction. So you see, as the blood is pushed, the valves close to keep the blood from falling back down. Because to get the blood back to the heart from like your toes, we have to go against a lot of gravity. And then we have capillaries. And capillaries are the smallest blood vessels. They also are the most numerous, okay? But because they're so small, they're literally 1 cell thick. So you see this right here? These are red blood cells traveling through a capillary, and you can see the capillary is as wide as the red blood cells. So capillary is literally just 1 cell thick. And it's 1 cell layer thick to allow diffusion. So those gases have to get in and out. The nutrients have to get in and out. The wastes have to get in and out. So they need to be very small. All right, so just a quick recap. We have artery away from the heart. Thick walls, smaller lumen. Lumen is the opening. Veins to the heart. Thin walls, They have a large lumen, a big space, and they also have valves. And then we have capillaries, most numerous, smallest blood vessels, single cell thick. And you can see right here, we start with an artery and the arteries get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until we get to capillaries. And then this is at the tissue level. Here's where the cells are. And then the capillaries will have a artery side and then a vein side. And then those little tiny veins, venules, get bigger and bigger and bigger until we have veins that head back toward the heart. So which blood vessel is used to measure pulse? Do you remember? Artery. Which blood vessels are the smallest? Do you remember? Capillary. Which blood vessels have valves? Do you remember? Valves and veins. All right, and in class, you're going to do a puzzle piece assignment. And that's it. That's the cardiovascular system and introduction. I hope you learned something new today.